Hello and good morning, everyone, and welcome to your morning briefing for Monday, the 7th of July, 2025. I'm your host, Mike Shelby. By the way, if you are watching this morning's live stream over on the Early Warning YouTube channel, today will be the last day. We are streaming over there. We're moving over to the Forward Observer channel starting tomorrow. And with that, let's go ahead and jump inside the Beltway. I hope everyone had a safe and happy Independence Day weekend. It's good to be back in the office. Robert, good morning. Let's go ahead and start with a quick update on the big, beautiful bill that was passed, signed into law on Friday. What's the latest?
So I took a look through this bill, and I found something interesting that it includes almost $30 billion for this fiscal year just for hiring and training new ICE personnel. This includes agents and support staff, and this number's important because that's almost triple what the FBI requested for its annual budget this year. And to me, this signals a major expansion of ICE that is coming, because that having almost 3 times the budget of the FBI just for hiring and training new personnel, I think is a sign that the Trump administration sees ICE as much more reliable for enforcing Trump's agenda than other federal agencies. Out of the agencies I looked at the budgets for, the FBI is the largest. Like DEA, ATF all have single-digit billion-dollar budgets. And then also in this bill, there's also $46 billion set aside for border infrastructure, and then I think it was something like $2 billion set aside to reimburse state-level governments for border wall construction, which I think that was included because states can. I think the Trump administration thinks states could get started on that border construction faster than the federal government could, and they're trying to incentivize that construction.
Interesting, and certainly. And by the way, the ICE budget increases probably has something to do with there being 20 to 30 million illegals in the United States. All right, let's go ahead and move on here to the GOP House majority. So we just had a Republican member of the House. He just resigned. He just up and left.
Yeah, this is Mark Green from Tennessee, and he did announce that he would leave the House after this bill passed, after the big beautiful bill passed. But he did officially announce his resignation on Friday, and that will bring the Republican House majority down to 219 seats to 212 for the Democrats.
Okay, so just a 7-seat majority now in the House.
Yeah, and some of those seats are non-voting delegates, so I think it's down now to a 4-vote margin to actually pass a bill in the House.
Wow, interesting. All right, let's move on. Just extremely tragic, catastrophic flooding we saw in Central Texas and north of San Antonio, and I think actually maybe the greater San Antonio area over the weekend. Robert, please catch us up on the details.
Yeah, this is an update from Kerr County Sheriff Larry Leda. He said that 38 adults and 21 children have died in the floods over the weekend, and that 11 campers and 1 counselor from Camp Mystic in Kerr County are still missing. And authorities in the counties around Kerr said that an additional 11 people were killed in the floods over the weekend. And President Trump did sign a major disaster declaration for Kerr County, and he said that the administration is going to assist local authorities in their recovery efforts.
Certainly. Yeah, and our prayers, and please keep these families and of the victims and the families and also the first responders in your prayers, because it has been pretty difficult, I understand, for some of them. All right, and then let's go ahead and move on. I didn't even know there was a Five Eyes ICE summit, but apparently it's annual, and there's one. Is it going on now this week, Robert?
Yeah, in San Diego until the end of the week. Apparently they're going to be discussing, quote, the race between law enforcement and criminal networks to harness emerging technologies, and this includes cryptocurrency, artificial intelligence, and what they're calling next generation communications.
Interesting. So Five Eyes is they call it the Anglosphere. It's the United States, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand. It is typically when someone talks about Five Eyes, they're talking about intelligence sharing, because that is some intelligence is releasable to Five Eyes partners. And now we're talking about law enforcement. But really, Robert, this seems like it's kind of has a criminal intelligence angle, does it not?
Yeah, and something that I have, so I did some criminal intelligence analysis coursework when I was in college and interacted with some criminal intelligence professionals, and that seems to be somewhere where a lot of law enforcement agencies have kind of not caught up. There's not a huge criminal intelligence apparatus at a lot of these law enforcement agencies. At the federal level, that's much different. There are analysts at like ICE and FBI and all these other federal agencies. But I think that part of this is probably going to be talking about pushing down that criminal intelligence capability to the local level, because a lot of, just like with immigration enforcement, ICE relies heavily on local and state level law enforcement personnel for support. And if they're going to try to expand criminal intelligence capability, they're also likely going to have to rely on those local and state agencies.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then finally, Pentagon, Northcom, U.S. North Command has announced, well, actually, it's not just 200. It's going to be several hundred new deployments, or several hundred Marines being deployed to Florida, Texas, and where else, Robert?
Louisiana. So the 200 are just coming down here to Florida, and then the other 500 are going to different locations within Louisiana and Texas. And Northcom said that these troops are not going to be involved in any law enforcement activity. They're only going to be providing administrative, clerical, and logistical support, specifically for ICE detention facilities in these states.
Mm-hmm. All right, interesting. And thanks for that, Robert. Let's go ahead and move on to the global sit rep. Jared, good morning. Let's start with the Houthis, which has sank a container ship, sank that in the Red Sea.
Yep. It's a bulk cargo ship, which usually is just, your standard containers. But yes, they did sink one over the weekend. This is not the first time they've done it. It's the first time in quite a while. The last time was April. But what stood out to me was the tactics used. The last couple have been missiles. This was a small boat swarm, which is not necessarily unusual for the Houthis to use, but it's unusual for them to get a sink out of it. Now, like I said, primarily this was small boats, but the small boats were accompanied by explosive unmanned surface vessels. That, I think, is the most important detail here. What that does is show that what Ukraine was demonstrating up in Russia or up near Russia in their Black Sea fleet is proliferating, and B, this shows Taiwan a proof of concept for the USVs that they are developing openly against China. So I think we're going to see a mass adoption of small boat swarm tactics accompanied by explosive USVs at basically anywhere that you have a major port, because they're cheap, they're easy. You have something that's effectively unbeatable for most people. And as far as I know, most navies don't even train against this. I know the U.S. Navy does, but the U.S. Navy doesn't like it. That's a difficult thing to beat. Now,
difficult to defend against. Now, just briefly, Jared, people keep saying the Houthis. Really, we're talking about the Yemeni government here, or the military now, whatever they are. But we've seen previously from the Houthis, it's basically an extortion racket, correct? I mean, you have to pay a toll or something like that to go through their water, and then if they don't like you, they'll attack you.
Pretty much. Which, if you are a lesser tier nation in control of a choke point like Yemen is, why wouldn't you, as the major powers recede in order to go fight each other? The U.S. and China are preparing to be somewhere else entirely. There's anti-piracy ops there, but that's not the main focus. So run a maritime toll booth. Do it, because you can make a lot of money doing that. And historically, that's kind of what people do anyway.
Mm-hmm. Now, listen, I know, Peter Zion, we've talked about him before. And, people, I love him or hate him. I think most people probably tend to hate him, but in our sphere at least. But this actually is one area where some of his predictions in his, I think, 2022 book, The End of the World is, what was it? The End of the World is Just Beginning, or something like that.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the return of piracy, and especially because other than the United States, there really is no other capable country in the world that has the size and the scope of a blue water navy required to conduct all these anti-piracy operations all throughout the world to secure these trade routes. I mean, we see a lot of anti-piracy, but it's nothing on the scope that the United States would be capable of. Correct?
Yeah, that's actually something that we've talked about and I've proposed here, is that I think we're entering a new age of piracy. Is you're going to see everybody all major navies shift away from giant capital ships like destroyers, cruisers, carriers, down to frigates, corvettes, just escorting things, because the main guarantor of maritime security, the United States, we're declining in power. And I think honestly that is more a function of the of power projection being technologically more difficult rather than a true decline of the United States. Not to say we're not, we kind of are, but technology is just outpacing anything we can do, the attacking technology.
Mm-hmm. All right, interesting. Well, let's go ahead and move on to this war in Hamas or against Hamas, and I'll let you just take it from there.
Yes, so this is coming from the leader of an Israel-backed anti-Hamas militia in Gaza named Popular Forces Group. Now, he told Israeli media that, quote, there's no stopping a civil war against Hamas. And the Popular Forces deny that they have any Israeli backing, but they did say outright, hey, we will work with the IDF to distribute aid in the future. So I think this is important because we've seen some rumblings about another set of ceasefire negotiations. On its face, I don't think that's likely. But if Israel has an out in order to have effectively a proxy force fight against Hamas, I think maybe there is hope for a ceasefire. So at least on its face, where you let this militia group fight Hamas, and then Israel doesn't have to be involved. They can step back and start to save face internationally. Moving on to BRICS. So over the weekend, BRICS hosted the latest summit down in Rio de Janeiro, and there really wasn't a lot that came out of this. There was a couple of statements condemning, U.S. attacks in Iran, which makes sense. Iran's now a member of it. The war in Gaza and support for India after the Kashmir attack. I do think that was noteworthy because India threw a fit after the Shanghai Cooperation Organization did not do that. But something that went widely unreported, Iran also did not send its head of state. We covered China and Russia, but Iran also stepped out. They sent just their foreign minister. And this to me looks like there's a lot of disunity in BRICS that nobody's really even committing to it anymore.
Well, I think they're still committed to it. If you're Vladimir Putin, the reason he didn't go was because Brazil would not give them a definitive answer about whether they would block his arrest or, he's got this International Criminal Court arrest warrant. Xi Jinping, I think he's tied up. There's a lot of smoke coming out of China. I think he's pretty tied up in this, probably a power fight. It sounds to me like there's actually some jostling to try to replace Xi Jinping in China. That's maybe one reason why he wouldn't go. Iran didn't leave, probably the Iranian president didn't go. I don't know, maybe he was afraid of being interdicted or something. He's obviously got his hands full in Iran right now. So I wouldn't say that that these countries are no longer committed to BRICS. They've just got their hands full with a lot of other things going on. So, all right, with that, let's go ahead and move down to Japan.
Yep.
Giving warships to the Philippines.
Yeah. We've been talking for a couple of weeks about Japan maybe breaking this no weapons export treaty. Well, here we go. Japanese and Philippines officials are about to conduct the visual inspection, which is almost the last step of several Japanese warships that they intend to transfer to the Philippines. Now, the two nations quietly agreed to this transfer of destroyer escorts, which are about the size of frigates, last year. They just didn't publicize it. But they're now deep into the process. They're getting ready to do it. And the Japanese plan to fully cycle out this class of destroyer escorts by 2027. So some of these will start ending up in the Philippines here very soon. And Japan's already got the replacement on the water functioning, perfectly integrated. So this can be a rapid buildup of the Philippines again. We recently covered that they, I think, doubled their frigate fleet. So this would be another 50% on it. And then kind of staying over in the Asian Pacific, China opened up 3 additional flight paths heading out of mainland China, which you can see on the map here, heading toward Taiwan to a flight path over the strait. Now, the reason this is important is this is effectively gray zone warfare coming out of China. You have these aircraft coming out directly at Taiwan. This is going to mask Chinese Air Force flights coming out of similar spots. Basically, unless they have their radar on and you can collect electronic intelligence to say, oh, that is a fighter's radar, because those look distinct. But otherwise, flight path wise, for basically until you would have to engage, they're going to look just like an airliner.
Mhm. Interesting. Very interesting. And then is this just if this is a game of baseball, Jared, and you got your regular 9 innings, something like this would be obviously be an early warning indicator. What inning would you put this at?
Probably 6 or 7. They have to try to be close to their military readiness. So being prepared to mask your readiness would make sense to be later on. I don't think this would be like an 8 or even top of the 9th.
Mm-hmm. And the reason I ask this, and just to explain a little bit here for the audience who's unfamiliar, whenever you're dealing with generating early warning, you're looking for things called indicators. And indicators are observable or potentially observable clues that give us insight into capabilities, intent, etc., of an enemy or adversary force. And so you start with the end state, which is China just ordered a blockade of Taiwan, and now they're going to go execute this blockade or quarantine or whatever ends up happening. And then you work your way back. What has to happen just before that order is given? Okay, what conditions or what assets need to be in place, or what would you expect to see or potentially expect to see before that order is given? And you make this long list of all the things that need to happen before that order is given. And let's just say there's 20 things on the list. And if you're sitting at, say, 7 out of 20, that military action is not likely, because there's still a lot of things that need to be done. But then you start to tick up from 7 to 10 to 14, and then you're up at 17 out of 20. And then all of a sudden, early warning becomes real, because they have done almost all the things that they need to do in order to go execute this mission. And so this is one of those indicators you would expect to see prior to some military action, because you do want to mask your fighter or your military aircraft's position, deployment, etc. All right, Jared, any last words on this before we move on?
Yeah, just a quick note. I think this would actually be primarily for like airborne troops rather than fighters, because even your radar signature then would look mostly like an airliner, and it'd be harder. Like Taiwan then has to effectively just get visual confirmation where they risk shooting an airliner down. That does not go over well for anybody. The U.S. Navy had to go through that back in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. So could we potentially see these? I don't even know what the Chinese transport aircraft are, but like our C-130 equivalent. But could we potentially see China Air written on the side of these things?
I don't think they'd go that route. Mm-hmm. Just because by the time you're visually confirming it, you're so close. Because people think that you can visually confirm far out, even a mile away. Aircraft are really hard to actually see details like that. You have to get extremely close.
You have to be
by the point you can read it, you can see, okay, this is not an airliner. I need to engage this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. All right, thanks for that, Jared. And let's go ahead and move on. We have 40 protests today, which is right about baseline. Been pretty on for Mondays, pretty much in the ballpark of where we've been. And then moving on, let's talk about Chicago. So last month, there were a handful of media reports talking about future surges of immigration enforcement. And that the first one we saw was in Los Angeles. And listen, I'm still trying to piece this together. There's not a lot of publicly available information on ICE operations or their strategy or what they're going to do next. So just looking at this, we do expect increased operations across the country, predominantly in large cities, because you go fishing where the fish are, and there's just most illegals are going to be in the large cities. And so Chicago is on that list. Chicago is one of the cities where I expect a surge to occur, similar to what we saw in Los Angeles. So this is interesting. There was an Antifa blog that posted a map and photographs of Department of Homeland Security and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, facilities in Chicago, Illinois. And this post includes photographs of the front of federal buildings, including the Chicago Immigration Court, the ICE Chicago Field Office, Immigration Supervision Appearance Program, or the ISAP office, Metropolitan Correctional Center, the Broadview Processing Center, and Homeland Security Investigations, or HSI, field office. So this is important because this would be a form of reconnaissance conducted on these buildings prior to direct action taking place. Now, these are just photographs. Any kind of direct action, like something similar to what we saw in Los Angeles, but in Chicago, I mean, it's not going to occur prior to the kickoff of some kind of surge operation. So we don't even know when that might be. I think they said Los Angeles was going to be around a 30-day, maybe as long as a 60-day operation. It's a 30-day operation. We're probably on the very tail end of that, being that it started in roughly the last part of the first week of June. And then you add 30 days and, we're right there. So I'm not sure where the next surge is going to be, but as I understand it, we're probably looking at multiple surges as ICE. Now that they will have their new ICE budget, they'll be bringing on lots of new folks. At any rate, but this surge was aside from baseline enforcement operations. So Chicago is one of those places where we expect that to happen. And then in the first 6 months of 2025, we actually have seen a massive increase of also baseline immigration enforcement arrests. They've been up over 350% in Montana, Nebraska, New Mexico, South Dakota, and Virginia. They're up an astounding 924% in Idaho. So that's a 924% increase in the number of those arrested. And this is just the first 6 months compared to all of 2024. Now, to be fair, in Idaho, where there's 925% increase in enforcement arrests, I think, if I recall correctly, I want to say there was like 77 immigration arrests in Idaho for all of 2024. So 924% increase is big, but we're starting from a very low number. But at any rate, it appears, all this stuff is baseline enforcement operations. This is not a surge like we saw in Los Angeles. There will eventually be a surge. And if there's going to be another period of Los Angeles-like arrests, then it's very similar to what we've been seeing in Portland, what we've seen in Seattle. Chicago is just another one of those hotbed cities for Antifa, another far left activity. And I expect Chicago will be quite turbulent once that happens. All right. And then moving on, let's go ahead all right, Robert, good morning again. So USDA, they have said that they're going to start allowing Mexican beef imports. And this is important because they may be importing beef with Mexican or New World screwworm. Is that correct?
Correct. And this is the first phase starting in Douglas, Arizona today. And they're going to allow horse, bison, and cattle imports from Mexico. The USDA said that they're going to expand this reopening to 4 other places: Columbus, New Mexico, Santa Teresa, New Mexico, Del Rio, and Laredo, Texas, over the next 3 months. And from what I could find, the Texas Animal Health Commission estimated that this New World screwworm cost beef producers in the entire Southwest between $50 and $100 million annually before it was eradicated. And I've seen some posts from former Trump official Joshua Steinman, who said that people with agricultural experts and people with expertise in this area were reaching out to him with concerns that the Trump administration is not getting all of the information they might need about the risk of this. He said that the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, which is currently ran by a Biden administration holdover, may not be accurately conveying the risk of reopening these imports from Mexico to Agricultural Secretary Brooke Rollins. And reopening these imports before ensuring that the Mexican government's efforts to stop the spread of this New World screwworm into the north of Mexico, I think does likely risk reintroducing that parasite into U.S. beef supply chains.
All right. Thanks for staying on top of this for us, Robert. I mean, realistically, if this does continue, the risk is very large that we could actually be importing the screwworm into the United States again. Is this a case where people ought to consider stocking up on beef just as a precaution, just in case there is disruption to the beef supply?
Well, I think so, because it is going to hit. It is going to hit costs. Obviously, that 50 to 100 million annual cost was in the 50s and 60s. I'm not sure if that is accounting for inflation since then. So you could be talking about a multiple times more annual cost, and just keeping it under control if this parasite does get reintroduced into the U.S.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks for that, Robert. All right, Jared, welcome back. Let's talk about the howitzer. So Taiwan has adopted pretty famously this porcupine strategy, which is that their plan is just to sink as many Chinese ships coming across the Taiwan Strait as they can. And I guess they're going to use howitzer artillery systems to do that, maybe?
Yes. So this is, I mean, they are just buying anything they can from us at this point. But I thought this was noteworthy because they're trying to buy the M109A7 self-propelled howitzer system, but they want to increase their buy from 40 up to 168. So up over 4 times what they were initially planning to buy. Now, this is the most advanced howitzer in the U.S. Army's M109 family. They're to the point where the Army's even retrofitting hundreds of the A6s into A7s. There were about 1,200 I could find were procured over the last decade. So using that math, if this goes forward at the current level, that would be no less than 13% of our most advanced howitzers and ammunition going to Taiwan in a single purchase. And that's not accounting for anything that was sent to Ukraine either. I don't know if any of these were off the top of my head. But yeah, that's a pretty significant degradation to Army readiness. However, potential silver lining here, the defense industry has been saying, hey, we need funding and guarantees long term to ramp up production. We can go from what we have to a lot more. We just can't go from 0 to a lot. So if these are new run purchases and not buying the current stock, I think this could potentially provide the funds to increase production capacity for the munitions and the guns themselves. I do think this will end up coming out of Army stock, though.
Mm-hmm. All right. Interesting. Thanks for that, Jared. And with that, I think we do have some questions. By the way, before we get to questions, just as a reminder, if you're coming on towards the end of the show here, if you're watching us over on the Early Warning Network YouTube channel, today's the last day we're broadcasting over there. We are moving to the Forward Observer channel. So if you go up to your YouTube page and you just search Forward Observer, click on us, subscribe, and you'll be able to watch the show tomorrow. All right, with that, Jared, let's go ahead and get into the questions. Good morning, Mike. Does anyone else think we need a name for the coyote behind Mike? Yeah, sure, we can come up with a name for him. Robert, did Congressman Mark Green, I guess retired Congressman Mark Green, that's his name, right? Did he give a reason for resigning?
All he said, I think, was that he's going to take an opportunity in the private sector. That was it. I don't think he gave. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's going to go have some big bucks job. All right. Wow, that's pretty incredible. You get elected to Congress and then you bounce early to go take a job somewhere else.
Well, I think also Tom Tillis said he's not going to run next year. He's retiring from the Senate. I think there are some Republicans that are probably see that they've either not, they've fallen not necessarily into the never Trump camp, but they do oppose some of the things Trump is doing. And generally he has taken, I think, effectively been taking more and more control of the Republican Party, and they see his agenda and the base that supports him might not be as friendly towards them in their reelection efforts. So I would expect there to be probably more resignation or more retirement announcements over the next year.
So they'll retire instead of facing a primary challenger. All right. Boy, I'd say with those Elon bucks coming into the 2026 primaries, could get quite messy.
Yeah, I was paying attention to the America Party things that happened over the weekend. He did walk back that filing, saying that was not the official filing, the one that was put out in public for the America Party. But I think, yeah, he's gonna. I think what's likely to happen is he's gonna put a lot of money into some of these primary elections, and they're not going to win the general. What they're going to do is probably bleed off like 5% of the vote away from a Republican, especially if they run a third party rather than primary.
I would tell you, I see what you're saying. I would be extremely surprised if Elon does something like that, knowing that if he in some of these races that are decided by 1 to 3%, I mean, we're not talking about a lot of votes here determining who goes to Congress and then who controls Congress. I would be just extremely surprised. I don't expect this from Elon Musk. What I think Elon Musk is going to do is run people in the primary against Republicans, and we may see some, what's it called, the America Party. We may see some America Party candidates running in the midterms, but I don't think we're going to see them in elections that are going to send Democrats to Congress. I think Elon Musk understands that as bad as some Republicans are, it's far worse for him to put more Democrats in charge. I could be wrong, obviously. I just don't see that happening.
Well, yeah, it's possible he runs these third party candidates in safe red seats, basically, which would be probably the easiest way for one of those candidates to actually win. If they're going to bleed off support from a Republican, is to run in a place where it's very likely for a Republican to win anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there's still lots of time, so we'll see. I do just want to cover this here. Elon Musk stated it's fake news that he's starting a new party. I don't know. He was pretty adamant about that's what he was going to do. He ran a Twitter poll, and he said the people have spoken.
Yeah, I think what it was a response to was that someone who is apparently a employee of Tesla, I think, put out a filing with the FEC that included his name and the phone number that went to like the Tesla investor support number, and it was pointed out that there might be some FEC violations with that, and I think it hit some mainstream news, and that's what he said was fake. I believe the filing, not the actual attempt to get the America Party going.
Okay, gotcha. All right, thanks, Robert. I think we do still have a few other questions. All right, Jared, who is this militia group the IDF is backing to fight Hamas?
They're called the Popular Forces Group. I've seen a lot of rumblings over the last couple of months that there were anti-Hamas forces, but nothing even remotely formal. This is
in Gaza.
Yeah. This is the first formal group I've actually seen named, and Israel says they back them.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Yeah, I mean, listen, anytime you back a militia in the Middle East, you may just understand you may suffer the law of unintended consequences.
Yeah,
as history goes.
Kind of thinking that's where this will end up. Just like, how does it not? It seems. What's the track record on that?
All right, what's the possibility of a coup in China? What does this mean for conflict in Taiwan and the U.S.? Well, let me just say this. We've seen, this is not the first time we've seen smoke around Xi Jinping. I think it's more likely to be serious than not. Just internal party jostling, and one of the many reasons is we have seen a lot of replacements in the PLA, senior generals, senior officials, and I've seen one China watcher, and I don't know if this is true or not, but this guy, that's all he does is China. And he says what's happening is that senior military officials who are loyal to Xi Jinping are being replaced with people who are loyal to some other Chinese guy. I don't know if that's the case or not, but previously, Jared, when we've seen senior Chinese military officials get arrested and replaced, it's for quote unquote corruption. In corruption, maybe they are extremely corrupt. Many, I'm sure, are, but corruption has always just been kind of a code word for not loyal enough to Xi Jinping. And apparently, the shoe's on the other foot now. What have you seen?
Yeah, so as far as where their loyalties lie, I haven't seen anything with that. that said, just based on the way that China normally operates as far as leadership goes, you end up with these, the leaders that really drive everything forward, like Mao and Deng and now Xi, and they do great things for China, but then they're almost immediately followed by somebody who doesn't really want to do a lot. They don't push the envelope, and then after that you end up with somebody who does even less. I think that's probably the route that China would go, is, hey, we're overstretching, we need to pull back, which does not bode well for the 2027 readiness deadline. Just plain and simple, it does not. That said, if somebody takes over that is former PLA or the People's Liberation Army, their armed forces, I think that we could see the 2027 deadline actually be fully enforced, because the PLA is typically where the most nationalistic forces of China go to. They want to be there. They want to reunite China. They are the people that just want to get the things done. So if Xi gets replaced, I'll keep a look on whether or not it's somebody who's career politics or has a history in the military. If it's in the military, I'll put out immediately, hey, heads up, this has bad potential.
Mm-hmm. Certainly a layer of unpredictability there. All right, thanks for that, Jared. There have been 200 Marines sent about to be sent to Florida. I don't know. We'll double check with Robert. Plans for deployments to Louisiana and Texas as well. Do you expect them in Chicago? Yes, the Trump administration has been very clear. They are going to deploy National Guard wherever they think they need them. So these deployments are happening under U.S. Northern Command. It's JTF 51, Joint Task Force 51, and they're responsible for, I think they still call it MACDIS, military assistance to civil disturbances. There may be some other name for it. I don't recall if MACDIS is current, but some colonel got turned into a general because he came up with a new name for an old mission. At any rate, yes, the Trump administration will absolutely be deploying additional National Guard to whatever city that they think they need them. And Chicago's on that list. Seattle, New York City, etc. Robert, when do these deployments, when will they be taking place generally?
I think within the next month. I'll have to double check the dates. I'm not sure if they actually put out the actual date, but at least here in Florida, I think they're not set to open up the Alligator Alcatraz facility for a little bit. Yeah. Other than that, I'm not sure on. I don't think they've announced the dates for the Louisiana or Texas deployments yet.
Okay. And then last question here: since this one big beautiful bill has passed, ICE is getting a lot more money. When does that take over at the beginning of fiscal year 26? So in the fall, in September, they're going to get this influx of cash, or does that?
I think that's as soon as this takes effect. I think as soon as the bill is supposed to take effect, which is sometime this month, I believe. I think I want to say the 21st.
Okay.
Is when it actually takes effect.
All right. So realistically, looking at a timeline on this, so ICE starts hiring. Do you know how long? I don't even know where the ICE officer training facility is or how long that school is, but let's look into maybe when some of these surges could happen next. If it's true that Los Angeles is or will be winding down, my expectation would be they're going to surge into another city. And, that's something that we may not find out until officers just start popping up in much larger numbers, but there's only a handful of cities. Chicago, Seattle, New York, Northern Virginia is another one where they've actually been ramping up arrests even before a surge. There's one other, maybe like Portland or something like that. But let's do some back of the napkin math, maybe on when we start to see these next surges. All right. Thanks for that, Robert. My understanding is the screwworm was eradicated by fly sterilization. Robert, do you know how they might combat it this time?
Well, yeah, that's the primary method is they put out basically sterile flies, sterile males, so that the females do not reproduce. From what I remember, the USDA did announce they're building a new facility to produce those sterile flies in South Texas. That's supposed to be online by the end of this year, I think. And I think somebody else pointed out in the audience that ivermectin does work for this, or at least partially works, but the primary method is the fly sterilization. That's what they've been doing in the Darien Gap for years to keep it there. And then I think obviously with the immigration surge up through the Darien Gap through Mexico is what really kind of broke that quarantine. And I think they have been moving, USDA has been moving that fly sterilization operation more and more northward from the Darien Gap over the last year. So I expect they're going to try to use that, continue to use that and probably surge it once that other facility comes online.
All right. I can see the New York Times headlines now. Trump administration wants to give horse space to cows. All right. I don't know. It's funnier in my head. When does the new website go live? All right. Well, it's kind of live right now. We're kind of slow rolling this thing. Rob is, I think he worked on it over the weekend. I think starting today, he will be starting to move folks over. So we're going to kind of slow roll do a soft opening of the new Ford Observer website, make sure everything's going. We're still working on the last watch floor feature so that we were able to post kind of like push live updates through to everyone. So as soon as we get that figured out, we will start bringing everyone over onto the same platform and to infinity and beyond after that. Any other questions, Jared? All right. Is there anything in the big, beautiful bill to start Trump's Liberty cities? Robert, I'll have to do a Google search. I would be extremely surprised if there is anything in there. However, let me just say this. The Liberty cities idea, I think it probably goes back to a book that was published back in the 1990s called The Sovereign Individual. And this is not the sovereign citizen stuff, but The Sovereign Individual was a book about the next 500 years in the West. And it's about life in the digital age and about how individuals are going to be regaining their sovereignty from nation states. Basically, the whole premise of the book is the concept of the nation state is going to go away. And it's a fantastic book. On the campaign trail, I think Trump or the Trump campaign put out that they wanted to build 10 futuristic tech cities from the ground, like starting from scratch, master plan, whatever. 10 cities that are going to be like these tech utopias. And I don't know. I haven't seen them revisit that. I would be very surprised to see that in the big, beautiful bill.
I didn't see any of that in the contents of the bill that I read, including the actual table of contents of the text. I think that part of that, or the most realistic version of that, was Senator Mike Lee's land sale amendment that got kicked out of the bill. And the major problem with that is the Liberty City thing, and which is the same problem with the land sales for housing, is where's the water going to come from? Because that whole region, states are still fighting over who is going to have to give up more water out of the Colorado River Basin. And there's just not enough water to go around for the proposed, the estimated houses being built if that land deal had gone through, much less 10 whole huge new cities. That water security would become an immediate issue.
Certainly. All right. Thanks for that, Robert. And listen, go ahead, Jared. Any other questions?
Yep, I was going to read one from Rumble.
Okay.
All right. So he asks, is there any realistic possibility of ICE deporting the low-end estimate of 11 million illegal aliens, given that would equate to 7,500 deportations per day on each day of the Trump admin?
No, probably not going to happen. They're up against the clock. Midterms in less than 18 months away. November next year, Congress takes over in January. So I would expect no. Here's part of the problem. And I'm just going to use another fishing analogy. When you catch a lot of fish out of the same pond, fish get harder to catch because there's fewer of those fish. So my expectation is that not only because, people will be hiding illegals up in their attics at some point, not literally, but I think they're going to be much more difficult to catch. I could be wrong. I know that the federal government's just created this it's a database of all citizens in the United States. And my understanding, I think it's called the SAVE or the SAFE database. My understanding is that they're doing this so that they can more quickly cross-check who is a citizen and who is not, to expedite their repatriation and the illegal immigrants' repatriation to their, or just send them to Sudan or wherever they're going to send these folks. So that's my take, Robert. Is it realistic that the Trump administration is going to deport 11 million people? And let's just call it by the end of 2026, because realistically, that could be the end of the Trump administration, or the Trump agenda in many ways.
I agree it's not realistic, and I think the Trump administration is going to focus on that census question because it's unrealistic. And so they've already started talking about changing that regulation on the 2030 census to delineate between non-citizen and citizen. And that's important because that's for the apportionment of House seats in electoral votes. And I think they're going to probably shift to focusing more on that as it becomes clear that they're not going to hit that 11 million number.
Right. Yeah, Ben does bring up something we've talked about before. The more aggressive the enforcement, the more likely it is that more people will just start self-deporting. We'll see. All right. And Jared, is that the last question?
Yeah, there is one more from the Early Warning Network, which we are moving, but paid subscriber over behind the paywall. What is the practical difference in it going after the funders or leaders of the leftist riots versus the leadership of Iran or other terrorist examples you gave? I think the primary tactical difference there is going to be how you actually engage them. You can't drone strike an Antifa leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, really, we're talking about law enforcement versus military enforcement. And I think that's a big thing. Hey, I just want to address this last thing. Direct action, LOL. Antifa couldn't punch their way out of a wet paper bag. Their version of a direct action is throwing a tantrum fit. LOL. What a joke. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but the reality is that, these are the people, these are the militants going out and throwing rocks and bricks and shooting off fireworks and lighting fires and attacking police officers, federal agents, night after night in some cases. I'm not saying that you posted that comment from your couch, but they're off the couch and they're going in and committing attacks against federal law enforcement. You're on YouTube watching a live stream, commenting in the chat. So I would say just, all things being equal, the person that can't fight their way out of a wet paper bag is more likely to be you than them, because they're actually out there doing stuff. I mean, they're risking 10 years in prison for this stuff. I mean, they're out there fighting law enforcement. You are 100% not. So I would just say maybe take a little time, look in the mirror, do some self-reflection in terms of who's doing things and who's not doing things. So with that, everyone, thanks so much for your support. It's going to do it for today's briefing. We'll be back in your inbox tomorrow morning, back on the show starting at 08 Central Time. Until then, be well and stay out front.